Our culture has accepted two huge lies. The first is that if you disagree with someone's lifestyle, you have to fear or hate them. The second is that to love someone means you agree with everything they believe or do. Both of these statements are nonsense. You don't have to compromise convictions to be compassionate. This quote from Pastor Rick Warren sums up the basis of my wicked problem, which addresses the root cause of society's inability to transcend its disagreements and progress toward meaningful solutions to our most pressing problems. My original focus was resolution of the American gun debate, but it evolved to a focus on the underlying truth behind the reason opposing sides can't get beyond their disagreements on any polarizing topic, and that's the chasm of difference between the values and beliefs of one person or group versus those of another person or group. Bridging this gap is key to overcoming the polarization and mutual contempt that prevent collaborative solutions to the problems that are plaguing our society. Today, Americans are more polarized than at any point in our country's history. And this condition has prevented meaningful resolution to critical issues. It's been an ongoing and growing problem since the 2000 presidential election, and the polarization was only amplified on the occurrence of George Floyd's murder on May 25, 2020. From the supporters of the Black Lives Matter movement to the proponents of making America great again, there's an inability to extend compassion and understanding for those with whom we disagree. This lack of empathy that's born out of our disagreements prevents collaborative reasoning that could result in mutually acceptable solutions. The goal of my Wicked Problem project is to exploit the cognitive influences behind these polarizing differences by creating a facilitated environment that breaks down cultural barriers and enables collaboration between opposing camps to propose meaningful solutions to socioeconomic and socio-political problems. From ongoing debates over climate change, healthcare, immigration, and guns, to newly rekindled topics like policing inequities, racial injustice, and economic inequality, proponents of either side of these debates remain polarized. Our perceptions of what's right or wrong, appropriate or inappropriate, good or evil, is informed by our culture, our upbringing, and our experiences. These factors heavily influence how people synthesize information to inform their beliefs. It stands to reason, then, that differences in culture will cause different groups to experience issues differently. From a cognitive perspective, the gulf between what things feel like to us and what they feel like to others is impassable. No matter how hard we try, we cannot enter another person's subjective conscious experience. Consequently, overcoming polarization relies on a suspension of our contempt for the other in order to get to a place of reciprocal authenticity and trust. Unfortunately, Pew Research finds that 64% of Americans think the public's trust in their fellow citizens is in decline, and 70% acknowledge that the trust deficit makes it more difficult to collaboratively solve problems. So the underlying cause of the polarization I've been talking about is the human need for acceptance. This is a powerful cognitive influence that distorts our ability to reason for the purpose of solving problems or drawing logical conclusions from data. Instead, reasoning has evolved to justify conclusions that allow us to live comfortably within our respective groups. Humans employ reasoning to win arguments instead of reasoning to understand truth. This often leads to poor decisions instead of improving knowledge to support fact-based solutions. So how does this get fixed? Our tendency to embrace information that supports our beliefs and reject information that doesn't is at the heart of our inability to overcome polarization. The solution is to create an organization for the express purpose of providing a forum to raise awareness of our confirmation bias and to leverage this new understanding to break down the cognitive barriers that drive contempt and suppress empathy, compassion, and collaboration. I envision a nonprofit organization that I've branded as the Critical Thinking Institute. It'll draw on the expertise of cognitive psychologists, conservative, progressive, and independent policy think tanks such as the Heritage Foundation, the Brookings Institute, the Aspen Institute, and others, as well as management consulting firms such as McKinsey and Gartner. The goal is to promote unbiased, critical thinking and debate, and to facilitate problem-solving workshops that result in actionable solutions to the issues of the day. The Critical Thinking Institute promotes a new awareness of the value of alternative views and opinions among competing camps over a myriad of socioeconomic and socio-political issues. Consequently, we resolve emotional intelligence blind spots that prevent the empathy necessary to perceive issues through the lens of the opposition. To accomplish this, our organization will provide access to fact-based research, panel discussions, and facilitated workshops, all aimed at producing solutions that are mutually acceptable to those of opposing beliefs. In doing so, we will satisfy our customers' collective need to produce viable solutions without fully compromising their core beliefs. Our initial approach will consist of an online offering that includes access to think tank research as well as a facility to hold online workshops and forum discussions. The plan is to evolve to an in-person offering as we become recognized by our target market as a moderating influence that drives collaborative problem resolution. Our key partners will include members of academia, select think tanks, and management consulting representation. Key suppliers will come from the areas of research analysis, website development, online learning platform development, social media engagement, and workshop facilitation. Partner resources will support our research requirements. All other requirements such as funding, marketing, accounting, and general operations will be the responsibility of the Critical Thinking Institute. At the heart of our value proposition is the ability to transcend cognitive and cultural barriers to solve socioeconomic and sociopolitical problems that are mutually acceptable to opposing sides. We'll accomplish this by establishing and maintaining an online platform that accommodates research and virtual workshops with an eye toward graduating to in-person facilitated forums and conferences. We'll position ourselves as a trusted advisor on removing bias from the solution development process and developing empathy-based techniques for problem solving. To accomplish our goals, our operation will be fully supported by private grants and donor funds of key resources required to realize our value proposition. The Critical Thinking Institute will rely heavily on its brand as a nonpartisan, solution-focused, truth-seeking advisor. We will require access to our partners' intellectual capital, and will leverage subject matter experts to fulfill our research and facilitated workshop needs. We intend to use a mix of owned and partner channels, primarily via websites and social media presence. In order to develop customer relationships, we'll leverage those distribution channels to gain access to our partners' collective customer base. Launch requires initial funding to establish our online presence and to initiate our marketing campaign. A potent and inevitable aspect of human cognition is to see the world through one's own eyes. The challenge of my wicked problem is to overcome that inevitability and remove the culture of contempt that prevents the collaboration required to arrive at mutually acceptable solutions. It's natural enough to fail to understand where another person's coming from, because we can never really know for sure. But it's another thing altogether to take the next step and blindly assume that they're not operating in good faith. As Psychology Today's Dr. Mark Alec puts it, if there's any doubt that this is the way disagreements are interpreted, we need to look no further than the present political climate, where differences often belie core values about social justice, racial and gender equality, policing equity, and the pursuits that generally make life worth living. Fundamentally, an individual's orientation around these topics reflects their core values, and that's the crux of the issue. Disagreements challenge our beliefs, and they call into question our perception of the type of person that we are. We're so desperate to validate our beliefs and our identities that our tolerance for difference is increasingly non-existent. And that's where polarization comes in. The trick is to find that space between conservatives and liberals, for example, that allows enough of a tolerance for difference to separate the person from their views. Instead of asking, how in the world can you believe what you're saying, ask them to help you understand why they believe what they're saying. This posture would open the door for dialogue that could lead to human-centered solutions that could benefit all of society. Ultimate success would be progress toward eliminating the polarizing divisiveness that threatens our nation's solidarity. The Critical Thinking Institute can be the catalyst toward realizing that goal. My name is Bernard Coles. Thank you for listening, and go try it.